Okay, so I want to talk about eyes now. Eyes to me, I mean, obviously when in character design, everything is important. The posing is important, expression is important, but of all of those elements put together, to me, the most important elements are the eyes. And to me, it's kind of obvious. I mean, when we talk to each other, we look at each other in the eye. We get signals from each other by looking at each in the eyes. Eyes emote. The eyes, they project emotion. They are, the cliche, the windows to the soul. And so to get the eyes right is extremely important in my mind. There's a lot of mistakes that people make when they're starting out drawing, trying to get expression, trying to draw faces with the eyes. And so I want to go over some of the things and talk about some of the things that I think about and talk about them. When I'm drawing eyes and using them for expression, they just add so much. And so anyway, why don't we go ahead and dive in? So the first thing I want to talk about is just how, I want to go a little bit beyond anatomy. I've talked about it in my anatomy course, how the eyes sit, how they're put together, realistic eyes. But I want to review that just a little bit. When I draw, when you guys see me draw expression, I always start out with that ball. Let's have a head that's tilted, let's say. I start out with that ball and I establish that center line and the eye line right there. And usually let's just draw very quickly a face shape in here that's going to come out something like that. Okay? Something like this. There we go. The first thing I want you to think about, and let's throw a nose in there. Just something real quick and simple. The first thing I want you to think about is just how those eyes are set. Eyes just don't sit on this ball, okay? On this ball that we create. I want you to think of them as being set into the head. And the reason I want you to think about that is because that affects the brows. When I'm talking about the eyes, I'm talking about this whole unit. The eye, the brow, they all work together to get across expression. The eyes without the brow, they don't work very well as far as getting expression across. That's why if you've ever seen anybody that's shaved their eyebrows off, it looks really weird. And so it's very important to get all of that working together. So once again, thinking about this, if we think about coming back here, if we think about a plane, this plane coming across and coming down in and then into the cheekbone like so, okay? Something like that. Those eyes are going to be set back in. The eyes obviously, they sit inside that socket in the skull. And so there's a distance between here, between the corner of the eye coming out to the bridge of the nose and back in again into that eye. It's not flat. And a lot of people kind of brush over that and see how you want to set them right into that skull. And that's the first thing I want you to think about when you're drawing. And let's just draw a regular brow sitting over the top of that. All right, that's the first thing I want you to think about is how those eyes sit. They sit inside that skull. There's, if I drew a line around here, you would hit the eyes and you'd come out for the bridge of the nose. You go in for the eyes, out for the bridge of the nose, back in and out around the skull. It's very important because, like, if let's say, let me shrink this up. So if we drew this character, maybe let's drop that eye line down. Maybe it's a very slight upshot in profile. You get that brow that cuts in. There's the bridge of the nose, let's say, that's coming in. Maybe we'll just draw a nose like this, okay? And there's a mouth. Draw that head coming back. That eye, it sits way back in here. It sits inside that skull. There's that bridge. I want you to think about that distance. Eyelashes coming out. See how it sits back inside the skull? That's something I want you to always remember because that'll give it a sense of form. You want to remember that form. Always think about form when you're designing your characters. Now, some characters can be really broad, but even then, I mean, broad in the sense of being really designy and kind of flat. You know, there's a lot of, you know, if you look at SpongeBob and a lot of that style of animation, those characters can be pretty flat sometimes, but I still think of them, and I'm sure the designers still think of them in a form, as a form. So think about that. Think about the form of whatever it is that you're creating, because that will help. It'll give your design, it'll ground it in reality. Okay. So think about that eye sitting back inside the skull, and the other thing too. Let me shrink this up. Think about perspective, how the eyes sit. The eyes, you know, as the head moves around, the perspective of those eyes are going to change too. So you always want to keep in mind your perspective, and we're going to get into that a little bit when we talk about more expressions in the face and all of that. But you really need to remember, and that's why I'm always drawing those, you know, on the ball, I'm always drawing those guidelines, because that helps with perspective. You know, if there's an eye that's sitting here, let's say, there's the brow coming out. If there's an eye here, I'm just going for kind of a general cartoony shape, then you want to follow that line around, and that other eye, and following perspective, it's kind of receding away from us, is going to sit kind of over here, like so. There we go, like that, okay? There. Thinking about perspective, let's go ahead and try, what if we're drawing a down shot, let's say, on the eyes. You know, the eyes are coming around, and let's say you got there's a center line there. The eye line is way down here, and maybe that face kind of comes out this way. The ears are going to be up in this area. Maybe the nose is down here. Well, once again, thinking about perspective, you want those eyes to sit right on that line, okay? And your brow, that brow is going to come right in, right along in here. Remember, this kind of comes in and back out for that nose. It goes in for the eyes, like so. Let me lighten that up so we can draw over the top of it like we did on the other ones. Now, if I blew this up, think about form. So that when you're thinking about different perspectives and you can picture that form in your brain, then it's not going to be too much of a leap to get that drawn correctly. So I'm thinking about that brow sitting here over the eye, and that eye is set inside, remember? So I'm just going to do here. Now, if the eye is looking down, let me go ahead and draw this in real quick. There we go. Following that form, like so, and cheekbone coming around. And I'm going to think about that cheekbone coming around like that because the head's looking down, right? So we want to think about that form. And the jaw coming in like so. Now, here we go. Actually, I'm going to finish out this nose. Nose spreads out. Okay, so if we're looking down, here the eyelids are fairly closed. As I look around, you'll see that my eyelids actually move with the direction. If I look down, my eyelids will move down. If I look up, my eyelids will go up. The eyelids will move with the direction of the eye, with the direction of the actual eyeball. So if I have a character that's looking way down, like so, it's almost going to look like at this angle that the character's eyes are closed. Now, if I want him to maybe look not quite at such a sharp angle, then I'm going to go ahead and lighten this up a little bit. Let me redraw these. I don't want it to be so heavy. There we go. Now I can bring that eyelid in here maybe, like it's coming up. I'm going to talk about eyelids next. And here the eye, maybe he's looking down like so. And it's, you know, notice the bottom is pretty much staying the same. Now, we can change that even more. Now he's looking up, now maybe he's really upset. He's really mad and he's looking down and he's kind of ticked off like that. Once again, keeping that the perspective right. Now I'm going to open up those eyes all the way and get the iris right in here. And he's really kind of pull these brows down like so, okay? So there's that. What if we have a character that's looking up? Let's open this up. Thinking about perspective and those eyes. There we go. Well, that brow, now we're looking up at the brow, right? Those cheekbones are coming around. This part of the face is going to come out like so. Maybe the chin would be in here, like so. I always think in simple terms like this. It's a good habit to get into. The brow would come in like this. The bridge of the nose would be in here. Maybe the nose is in here somewhere, like so. So we're looking up. Very, very, very quickly done, okay? And we're going to set those eyes in. That forehead kind of slopes back. And thinking about perspective, that's going to come back here like this. Maybe that ear, we're looking up at the ear. Jawline goes right up into the ear. That comes around. Maybe we're getting that neck comes down like so. All right. So thinking about, you know, that they sit on these planes. You got a cheek plane that comes out. It comes out this way, and then the brow goes in, and then the cheek plane comes out. Okay, and the eye sits right in the middle of there. So that's what that eye line represents, is the meeting of those two planes. Well, thinking about that, I want to set that eye. I'm going to actually set it back a little further than what I've got here. Here's the bridge of the nose. That's going to come out this way, right? Well, let's get that eye back in here. We're going to be looking up at the top eyelashes, and we're going to be looking straight up at the plane of the bottom eyelid. So that tends to kind of go a little flat when we're at this angle, like so. And then that eyebrow would sit right up here. Maybe we get a little furrow of the brow in there. Okay? And if we really want him to look up, and we get that iris like so. And you can feel him looking up like that. Like thinking about where those eyes sit within the plane. Now, you know, there's the socket sitting in there like so, and the eye sits right inside that. Okay, so that's just a little bit of just thinking about how the perspective, you know, whether it's a down shot, up shot, looking at the eyes going around. Let's talk about that really quick. So let's talk about that a little bit. The eyes going around a perspective. So here, if we've got, draw our line there. Maybe we got a character. That's like so. There we go, big ears. Maybe he's a goofy little kid, like so. We'll give him a little round nose. Maybe a goofy little grin. There you go. So here, we'll get the eye in here. And so from straight on, it's pretty straightforward, obviously, right? We get the eyes in. But I'm still thinking about form. You know, I'm thinking about how these eyes sit inside the head. Now from a straight on shot, it's not so difficult. You know, everything's kind of symmetrical and you know, it's easy to kind of cheat, which is what a lot of people do when they do their straight on shots. They're cheating because they don't really need to think much more beyond that. But if I take this character and I start to turn him in 3/4 and move him around, I want him to still feel like this character. But now I got to really start thinking about perspective. I got to start thinking about form. So I'm going to turn these off right now. If I take him, and now if I draw the same character, but now, and let's put the eye line in the same spot, but instead of drawing him straight on, I want to draw him this way. There's the center line. Well, now I got to think about, okay, now he's got a brow. I think about, okay, here's the brow there. I want to think about it up here. So that brow is coming up, and it comes out into a little face right here. Keep that nice and simple. And his nose is maybe sitting out here. Just drawing very quick. And let's give him his goofy little smile again. Same character, different angle. Same expression, different angle, okay? Or at least that's what I'm trying to do. But now we're thinking about, okay, here the eye is, I want to set it back inside the skull. He's still cartoony, but I want to think about him. I want to think about the form. You always got to think about that form. Remember the form. And then this eye, it's going around, and it's going around the side of the skull, and it's sitting back inside. So we're not going to, the bridge of the nose, that's going to come up into the eyebrows. The bridge of the nose is going to cover up a fair amount of that. And it's also receding, going around away from us. So if you see here, I think about those eyelids, the eyelashes, I'm sorry, coming around like so. Think about perspective. And actually here, I could probably get away with moving that over a little bit more. There we go. And then drawing the rest of them out. Those big goofy ears. Nice big ears, which I like on cartoony characters. There. And there you've got a nice simple kid, but thinking about how, how those eyes sit inside the skull and their perspective, okay? These are things I want you to think about just as a basis for when you're starting to come up with characters. So another thing I want to talk about, let's get into how the eyes and the brow, how they work together, because it's very important to get your expressions clear by getting them to work together in the right way. One thing I learned a long time ago, I mentioned this in an earlier video, but I want to reiterate it again, is just getting, from a single eye, looking at a single eye, how you get that eye and the brow and the eye kind of working together. And then we're going to pull in the other eye and we'll get the expression starting to work together. But the first thing, let's just draw a typical cartoon eye here, which tends to be, we got a little plane on the bottom and this rounded top, okay? And let's give it a little bit of eyelash like so. There, nice and typical. Draw a big iris in here. There we go. And I'll talk about what I'm thinking about when I do this here too. There, just give it a little bit of life. Now, think of it as these radiating ovals going out. So, and what I mean is you've got the iris here, and then you've got this kind of radiating out. And if you drew a line up, an imaginary line going from the corner of the eye up here, and around, kind of mimicking that same shape, then that'll take you right up to the eyebrow. Like so. And this can be as high as you want it, as low as you want it. And then thinking about that coming up and radiating out, you can, that can be kind of the muscle within the brow itself. Okay, this is, I think about this a lot, and it's these units, this is all kind of one unit here like this, with the eye, and you might have an eyelid in here, like so. Let's throw that in. And maybe a little bottom lid in there too, but that's separate. I think about these units all working together, the top eyelid, the eyebrow, and all this meat. They all work together. As this compresses, as if you do a mean look, and scrunch your eyes, well, that's going to affect how the lid and all of this meat right here, how that affects the eye underneath, the lid underneath. They all kind of work together in varying degrees, okay? And so I want you to think about kind of all of this as a single unit together. And then the next part I want to talk about now is getting in there and talking about, let's go ahead and draw the other eye, how they all work together, how both eyes work to get expression across. Here's the other eye sitting here. Once again, radiating shapes coming up. Let's get that. And there's a brow right here. There we go. There. That's a little small, but that's okay. So thinking about how all of this works together, okay? So, first things, let's talk about that. Let's just get a normal neutral look. We're just going to go with the eyes. So this is what I think about, and when I'm doing expressions. Okay, there we go. Eye line, center line. I'm going to knock that opacity down. Let's draw right on top of it. So let's do a neutral expression. We'll get that brow out here like so. Let's give him kind of a heavy brow. Maybe he's got a big nose. Whoop, big nose. Big goofy lips. Okay? And a little chin. Like so. So, I'm going to set that eye back in here. And I'm going to give him maybe average sized eyes like so. And let's bring that around. I'm thinking about the eye kind of turning because we're in 3/4. And knock that size down. Let's blow that up a little bit. Here's the corner of the eye, corner of the eye. Maybe there is a little bit of a lid right here. There we go. And once again, thinking about that eye being set inside. The other eyelid coming around. Like so. Iris. Once again, this is just a normal, neutral look. I just want you to think about, if you're drawing along with me, we're really just thinking about form right now so we can understand what's going on. So this brow, right where the bridge is usually a little higher than the center line, that bridge of the nose, and that comes up. And a lot of times that's where the eyebrow will start. We're in 3/4, remember? And then it comes around. And this comes right around this way, so this is going to wrap around that brow a little bit, right? And it comes down like so. Right into our character with the big schnoz here. Okay? So there's a very simple, neutral look. And I'm thinking about, okay, here's that meat that I was talking about. Maybe you might want to put a little bit of a break there. And I think about this unit coming here and going into the bottom of the eye, like so. All right? Now, let's take it and let's start playing with some expressions. Now, what if we want to do a character that's angry? Well, let's take those eyes. I'm going to knock this down a little bit. Once again, I'm just going to start with our ball for our kind of generic character. Let's do something a little more cartoony. There we go. So we got a shape here like so. Well, obviously, what's anger? We're going to furrow those brows, right? Well, I want to think about this. If we come up here, looking at these brows, I want to bring that mass down. It's not just eyebrows moving up and down, which is what a lot of people, that's a mistake they make. It's not just eyebrows moving up and down on a drawing. Think of the form. And I'm going to sound like a broken record. Think about form. There's muscle under there. Even if it's a cartoony character, there's muscle under here that's going to go up and down. There's flesh. If you want these characters to be believable, then you have to make them rooted in some type of reality. Even if it's a cartoon reality, you want it to be something that you can relate to. And when you can think about the brow, you think about the anatomy, even on a cartoony character from a realistic standpoint, it makes your character more believable. Okay, so that being said, let's come up here. Now I'm going to think about that whole brow. Well, the first thing I want to do, we've already talked about those simple, getting those simple iconic shapes. So anger is the furrowed brow like that. But now I want that brow. I'm going to build some of that meat in there. And what's happening, if you scrunch your brow, it kind of comes together. All this compresses. It contracts. The muscle that's in there is contracting. So it's going to furrow that brow like so. You might get a little scrunch in the nose. There we go. Now, and a lot of times you can get those. You can push that, you want to exaggerate it, you can push those brows right over the eyes. So that's what I'm going to do here. Push them right over the top of those eyes. And everything's getting compressed, coming together. That's a really simple way of getting anger across. They're all working together. Everything's doing the same thing. It's all compressing, coming together. Let me go ahead and draw this iris in and an iris here. Now you'll notice, I did this, it's very subtle. This is another thing to think about. I'll tell you in just a second once I get this pupil drawn in. There. Notice that the eyes are slightly looking like this. The irises if I draw the eyeballs, if we were just looking at the eyeballs sitting in space, let's say, if you want it to feel like your character is looking at something that's 3, 4, 5 feet away, then a lot of times you got to take those eyes and turn them slightly towards each other. We normally look that way because we're focusing in on a point that's a certain distance away. So those eyes tend to move just slightly. Now, I'm not making them cross-eyed. You don't want them looking at your nose right here. But always think about those eyes being slightly turned in. That's something a lot of people don't think about. But if you look at this eye, there's a lot of white space right here. He's looking, it's turned over to the right. But this eye here, there's more white space on the right there. So it's slightly turned inward, but it doesn't feel like he's cross-eyed. It feels like he's looking at something that's about 3 or 4 feet away. That's important to get your characters looking in the right place. I always think about that when I'm drawing faces. Okay. The other thing too, if you want to get a little bit more, this might be a little detail-y, but if you want to get that eye to feel like it's wet, you want to get that nice lifelike feel to it. Well, there's a couple of things that I think about. Let's say we've got an eye right here. There we go. Okay, so we've got a pretty typical eye. And you'll see I always draw a little circle. That's my indication for a highlight. And then I'll just shade it in. I'll draw my pupil. I like characters, personally, I like to design characters that have pupils. Sometimes you can simply, a lot of people like to simplify it and just get the irises, for a real cartoony character. This just feels, it's got more life to it. And you'll always notice a lot of times I'm shading around that highlight. Right near the highlight, I tend to shade like so. Well, there's an actual real world reason I do that. That's how, a lot of times, how light hits. If you think about the eye, the iris is actually kind of dish-shaped. If we look at the iris, if we took it out of the eye, it's kind of shaped like a bowl, like that, with the pupil inside, like that. If we drew the lens over the eye like this. If this is where the eyeball, the iris is kind of this bowl shape. Well, if you think about light, let's say light is coming in from this direction. If light is coming in from this direction, you're going to get a highlight back up here. Well, because the light is coming from this direction, this part of the iris, because it's in shadow, it's not getting direct light, it might go a little bit in shadow. And then this part of the iris, the opposite side, that's going to be lit. So once again, I'm going to come back over here, thinking about this as a bowl that goes away from us. The light is coming in this direction. That's why there's a highlight. There's a highlight right here. So that light comes in, hits that highlight, but because the part of the iris is kind of turned away from the light, it goes a little darker. So a lot of times I'll end up kind of darkening that in just to add a little bit of realism. I do it with cartoony characters. It's just something that I've done, and if it's something you want to do, there's a little tip for you. And a lot of times too, you'll see that I add a little bit of glint over here of the light, kind of catching a little bit of light. I mean the moisture in the bottom of the eyelid, just to get it to feel a little wet. And if I, let's see, if I do this, just lightly add that, then you've got an eye that kind of feels, it's cartoony, but it feels kind of real at the same time, okay? So let's take it now and let's say, what if we have the character, let me blow this up a little bit. No, let's play it kind of surprise. Well, now we want those brows to be way up here, right? Let's really push it, because this is all about caricature. We want to push the caricature. So let's pull those brows way up. Well, the other thing that, remember I was talking about, when I was talking about the whole eye unit, the brow and the eye all kind of working together. Well, if these brows are coming up, like so, if they're coming up, well, it's going to pull the tops of the eyes up too, right? So once again, let's think about that shape. I'm going to pull that eye over just a little bit. There we go. Let's really pull it up, like so, and sit that back in the skull. Pull that eyelid up even higher. Maybe that iris is just completely, there we go. Maybe that iris is just completely surrounded by white. That's going to really make it feel like surprise or horror, scared, fear. They all kind of, from an eye standpoint, they all kind of have the same look to them, right? Let me knock that back a little bit. So if we draw this, and once again, thinking about that whole unit of that mass of the brow, muscle and everything, you're going to get a bunch of scrunching up in the eyebrow, in the brow, the forehead, bringing those eyebrows way, way up. Well, that's all going to affect, it's going to pull the eyelids up here, right? These are not realistic eyes. These are pushed cartoony eyes, right? We don't have big round eyes like this, but it's caricatured. We're pushing reality. There. Look at that eye just getting pulled way up. And the same thing here. So we're going to bring this around. Big surprise. And I want this to feel, there we go. I'm going to pull that pupil over a little bit. There, big surprise, like so, like that. All of this works together as these brows go up. the eyelids are going to go up. Now now what happens when you don't do that? You can see this is where this is where different expressions will come in. So now let's take that same idea that we just drew, like so. Let's pull that brow way up. Oh, big surprise. I'm going to pull this down a little bit. Big surprise. Like so. Let's draw the shape of the eye in here. We're going to have that nose coming down. Let's draw the shape of the eye in here. Just the same as what we just did, right? But now, so here we've got a character. We're pulling. We don't want to do surprise now. We want to try something different. What if he's fighting? He's, there's the fear and the eyes are getting pulled back, but what if he's fighting it and he's kind of tired and he's trying to keep from falling asleep, so he's pulling his eyebrows up to try to pull the eyelids up. That's a completely different feel. But so there's that same eye shape, but now it's going up into the lids. And now it's a guy who's desperately trying to stay awake, right? Super tired, pulling those eyes up. So there's a lot of, just by playing with the brow and the eyes and playing them either with each other or against each other, you're going to get different expressions like I just created there. Now here's another thing to think about. A lot of times, the eyes and the brows, they don't always do the same thing. Especially if I'm looking over here, maybe I want to cock an eyebrow up, I'm looking off to the side. That's a pretty common expression. So if I have a character here, turned, maybe he's looking over screen left. Well, I've got an eye, let's say I've got a brow that's coming in like so, and then one that's going to be cocked up in the air because I want that eye, I want it to feel like he's looking over. Let's give him a different nose. There we go. Make it feel like he's looking over to the right, like so. A lot of times people will do, they'll do, let's say, let's see if I can do this the right way. What they'll do is they'll have an eyebrow down. Let's say it's an eyebrow like this. And then all of a sudden they're going to have an eyebrow up here like that. And what happens is it disjoints. These work as a unit. If you see people that can, I can't do it, but if you see people that can raise their eyebrows, you'll see that it always feels like there's a string, there's something connected. And so when you start doing this with the eyebrows instead of doing this with the eyebrows, it disconnects them and it breaks up the expression. So what I'm saying is, you take a character, and when you cock your eyebrows, make it feel like those brows, the muscle underneath, everything is connected. So if I have a character that's here, and I have this, there's the meat coming in. Well, that's going to be scrunched a little bit. Think of it, you could almost draw a line. Like so. Like that, okay? That will give your expression clarity. There we go. Now let's draw the other, whoops. Draw the other eye over here. And we'll just get that. Just draw that in real quickly. Still thinking about the masses. Like so. Think about your brows being connected. Like so. Always think about that. Don't try to break them. Don't break them up because you'll end up breaking up the pose. Or the expression, I should say. So let's go ahead and talk about maybe, different aged eyes. If we did a baby. Let's do a baby. Well, a baby, first of all, their proportions are going to be quite a bit different. You know, the eyes on a baby are just as big as the eyes on that baby as an adult. The eyes don't grow. So when, you know, babies are small, the reason they have big eyes is because they literally do have big eyes compared to their body. And so one thing I've found that adds to cuteness, adds to making them feel young is, you know, you can make them big, obviously, and set low on the head. Babies have bigger craniums, like so. Let's give them some curly hair. I always start out with a scribble like this. Big eyes compared to their proportion. But also notice I'm setting them further apart. There's something about that that feels more appealing, gives it a better cute factor. I'm going to pull that nose over a little bit. And maybe just a little dainty little mouth. There we go. You know, play with proportions. That's a big part, but I'm still thinking about those eyes being set into the skull, like so. But you can play with, and look at the size of the iris. I can give really big iris. And that really adds to that cute factor, right? Oh, that's wonky. That really adds to the cute factor. So I'm always thinking about playing with those proportions. Let's try female. Maybe we've got a character that's maybe a little more, let's make her a little more sultry. Her hair is pulled back. She's got a big hair pulled back. Maybe she's very elegant. Back of the head back here. Long neck, like so. There we go. Big earrings, something like so. Just very quick. Very quick. Still thinking about form. Okay. Whoops. If I lighten that up, you know, there's a lot of different shapes that come off as feminine. Let's go ahead and give her a little button nose. Bring that brow out. Whoops. Nice, clean eyebrows. Nice full lips. Like so. Now, if we drew, you know, give them a slight upturn, that tends to be nice and appealing. A little bigger, making them a little bigger. Notice I'm getting nice and, you know, I want to find some nice curves to those eyes. This tends to be, you know, very appealing. I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm still going to set that eye back inside the skull. I'm going to get a smaller brush. Set it right back inside there. But I want it to feel like it's coming down a little bit. You know, got this feel, and want to do the same feel on the other side. And then these eyelashes coming out, and they would come around, wrapping around the other side, right? There. So you have something that feels a bit more feminine. This feels nice and feminine. So there's all kinds of different shapes to the eyes that you can play with. Let's go ahead and if you get that iris to where the top part is covered up a little bit. It gives it a little bit more of a sultry look. And then you can give it a real sultry look by kind of bringing that eyelid up a little bit. Bringing the eyelid up a little bit like so. And it gives it a little bit more sultriness. You even add a little bit of a shadow. The eyelids are casting a shadow maybe. We'll come in here just like we did before. There. And so we get, the female look to the eyes. There's a million different shapes that you can play with the eyes, but the biggest thing, if you think about them being, set inside the skull, in the brow and the eyelids and everything working together, we can take these eyes. What if we took these eyes and let's do something that's a little more profile. This is a look that I like to draw. Let's say we have the same character and she's coming out like so. Maybe her, we're pushing the cartooniness a bit. Maybe her lips, big full lips. Like so. Pull this out just a little bit. So if I knock that back a little, thinking about that eye line, like this, I'm going to bring that break of the nose is right in there. There we go. And as far as the mouth goes and all that kind of stuff, I've covered all that. We've covered all that in the anatomy course. There we go. So we got a nice little profile happening. Now, maybe, to get that sultry look, the whole thing I'm doing here is I want to show you kind of some fun stuff you can play with, eyes and profile. It can be thinking about how everything kind of comes together here, and then if I could draw around, the other corner of that eye would be down inside there. The other thing too, if you look at an eye in profile, there's so much to talk about with eyes. I could go on and on and on about this, but hopefully you guys are learning. If you look at the eye in profile, if we look at it perfectly in profile, it tends to come this way, meaning the top part of the lid tends to be out in front of the bottom part, right? Like so. Like that. It tends to be out just a little bit more in front. If I drew a line straight down, you'd have it would look like that. So here, I have her looking up a little bit and tilted up, but it's still a little too much. So if I tilt this more this way, it feels a little better. And so we can get this kind of feel. All right, it feels kind of like a Disney princess kind of feel. The ears out here. All right, I'm always thinking about that form, right? Think about that form. There. Maybe that eyelid comes up in there. But what if we want her to feel like she's trying to be a little more sexy? Thinking, once again, there's this shape underneath, but now I want to do this. Maybe bring the bottom eyelids up a little bit. Let me clean that up. Look how much it changes the feel of the pose. Now all of a sudden it feels like she's, if I get rid of this over, I can't, there we go. Get rid of that over there. Now it feels like she's being a little more seductive, maybe. Maybe she's trying, I don't know. But it changes the whole mood to the expression just by playing with those eyelids. which is another thing. If we talk about the eyelids real fast, the eyelids don't come down like a shutter. They don't come down, you know, a lot of people forget, especially in big cartoony eyes, forget that the eyelids are connected here and here. And so when they open up, if you imagine this eye as being closed and then it's partly open, it starts here and comes around. So there's an eyeball, there's the iris underneath. And then as it opens this way, still connecting on that other side. If I drew the iris underneath, it opens up in that way. Because sometimes people will draw the eye when they animate it, and all of a sudden, you know, the eye is open here, and then it opens here, and then it opens up like a shutter, like you pulled the blinds open, and it doesn't work that way. So if you're drawing stills, remember to connect those eyes, connect those eyelids. If you're just drawing a pose, connect them in the corner. That's where they're connected on us. That's how it works, okay? So just to reiterate, you know, keep those eyes simple. Remember how they sit inside the skull. We're going to do a lot more in the following videos. We're going to do a lot more with expression and drawing and posing and stuff like that. But I want you to think about when you do get into the expressions, when you're drawing on your own, think about what's happening in that underlying structure. Think about not just the skull, but there's muscles. There's muscles that move over the skull. Even in a very cartoony character, you still want to have that reality. You want to play with those brows. Really experiment. Remember that they stay connected too as you do different expressions. Don't separate those eyebrows because that'll break up the expression and it'll feel wonky. But anyway, you know, experiment, play with, you know, what happens when you open the brow, and I mean, and you know, you keep the eyelids down as opposed to keeping the eyelids open. I mean, there's a whole bunch of, there's 1,000 different expressions you can do with the eyes that we just don't have the time to do here. But hopefully I gave you a little bit of a basis to think about when you're thinking about drawing your eyes, to start playing with it and seeing what you can come up with. But once again, just like everything else, the simpler you keep it, the better. If you start getting a whole bunch of different lines going in different directions, then it's gonna dilute your expressions. And so you want to make sure you're making clear, very clear statements. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the next video.